We're going to stick with retail because the National Retail Federation's big show is underway here in New York, and there's no shortage of innovators and industry leaders at the conference. As always, our Courtney Reagan is there. She's got a first on CNBC interview for us with Rick Caruso, founder and CEO of Caruso Affiliated, who's been recognized, Courtney, for inventing and reinventing the traditional shopping mall experience. Take it away.
That's absolutely right, Sarah, and thank you for joining us, Rick. You know, last year at this very conference, you made some pretty brazen comments and said unless retail really reinvents itself in 10 to 15 years, the malls as we know them today will be extinct. You still believe that to be true?
I do still believe that. And I think what you've seen over time is that retailers are getting much more engaged in the experience. I think the challenge that the indoor mall has is creating that experience, because people want to be able to be engaged. They want a great experience. And retailers need to express their brand in order to do that. Difficult to do in an indoor mall the way they're operated today. I do believe that brick and mortar is in a resurgence, and I think there's opportunities for great growth in brick and mortar. You see many more online retailers converting to brick and mortar. I think great retail is going to have two channels. It's going to have a great experience online, and it's going to have a great experience in the store. That's the future of retail for me.
So then what's the key? If there is a resurgence and I'm a retailer that has a physical location, how do I make sure it's appealing? How have you done it at the Grove and other properties?
Well, let's take a couple examples of retailers who I think are doing a great job, because we saw retailers on our properties up double digits. So one great example is Restoration Hardware. The whole experience of walking into that store, it's immersive, it's inspirational. It sort of causes you to want to buy more product, right? And that's what retail has to do. It has to engage you. I think it has to be relevant. It has to be personal. People need to know you. You have to be much more of a shopkeeper than a retailer in understanding who your customer is. And when you do that, success is great. We saw this year Nordstrom on our properties up double digits. We have a 20% swing in growth above the indoor malls based on what's been reported. So we're up double digits in foot traffic. The malls reported down about 8%. So there is a path to success on this. The right retailers are getting rewarded for it. And I think there's just going to be a lot of success in 2015 because you start seeing people engaging and much more differentiating their product, curating their product, and being experiential on their product.
Nordstrom, of course, is one that has always paid attention to customer service, made sure that they are there and having that conversation with the consumer. And I believe Sarah has a question.
I think I've lost my earpiece.
Oh.
There you are.
Hey, Rick. Good to see you. Just a quick question. Based on your conversation here about shopping centers, do you see a story of two different shopping centers? In other words, inequality is a huge problem. I know Ben Bernanke was there at the conference talking about the destruction of the middle class. You're in the high end. What kind of gap do you see between your kind of high-end shopping centers and the lower to middle income shopping centers anchored by the traditional department stores like JCPenney and Sears, which are struggling?
I don't think we're in the high end. I think we're in the people business. I think if you go onto our properties, we serve a wide demographic. I mean, we have every ethnicity, every demographic on our property, and we're trying to serve every one of them. The difference is, no matter what the demographic is, no matter what the classification is, people want to have a great experience. And I think if you look historically into great retail, whether years ago it was Sears, whatever the case is, they always had retail that connected with the consumer and connected with the guest. Many of these stores have lost it, and they're in a commodity business. You have to differentiate your product. Probably more difficult to do at the lower end of the product range, but it can be done. And look at it with an H&M, look at it with the Zara, look at it with the Topshop. They've taken a market, they've differentiated it, added an experience. I know Topshop, their sales were dramatically wonderful this year, so it can be done.
So, Rick, there are, according to Green Street Advisors, there are about 60 malls across this country that are on the verge of closing even as we speak, and a lot of them will seem desperate in what's happening and the environment in which they find themselves. How can they drive to a better place? I mean, how do you organize that? Who initiates that? Or is the game effectively lost for them if they're already at that stage?
Well, I think some of them are lost. I think some of these malls, they don't sort of fit the circumstances anymore, and that's what I predicted a year ago. And so some of these malls are going to have to get readapted and reused. They'll probably get torn down, and maybe it becomes housing, maybe it becomes something else. I think the better malls are going to do fine, but even if you're a better mall, you have to change the experience of walking into a mall. And the problem is they have just become sort of this arcade or circus of retailers that doesn't differentiate anything. And they become destination oriented where people go there for a certain shop and then they leave. You can't deny the fact that retail on great streets and in great outdoor centers that engage a consumer, have a human experience, are doing very well. And the malls need to look at that. It's up to the ownership and the developers to change that experience and work closely with the retailers to differentiate themselves.
And so, Rick, just to wrap it all up, if we think about the consumer, Bernanke today said that consumers are probably as good as they've been since 2006 or 2007, but it took us a long time to get there. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I do agree with that sentiment, but I think people today are much more confident. I think there's opportunities for them to grow their income. You're seeing oil prices down, which adds to their disposable income. I think there's just a feeling that you're doing better in the economy. But clearly, the disparity that we have in wealth needs to be addressed. There's no doubt about it. But I don't care what your economic classification is, you still have the same problems. You have a shortage of time. You want a great experience. You want to be able to connect with your family. And I think as the world becomes more complicated, there is a resurgence of neighborhoods and local shopping and feeling connected to a community. And the retailers that tap into that, I believe, will be very successful. If you're singular, if you're bland, if you can get lost with the mix, you're just not going to succeed. And that's the problem with the indoor malls. You could walk into many indoor malls in this country, you have no idea where you are.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rick.
Thanks,
I hope that we'll be able to continue to check in with you over time. I hope that your conclusion doesn't come true and that retail does find its way.
I think retail is going to be great. I think brick and mortar is going to be great.
Great. Thank you so much,
Courtney.
Rick Caruso. Back to you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney, for bringing us that conversation from the National Retail Federation's big conference.